Hey everyone, this is Carbonite, and today I have finally figured out how I want to build Set 6 Messiah. So obviously starting off with the deck, what do I mean when I say I finally solved Set 6 Messiah? Well, I have tried basically every single Messiah build under the sun. I played the initial just like basic bitch build. I played the set order build. I even went back to my refurbishment dock roots with that build that I did last year, but none of them actually felt really good. You would have some hands where like, oh, this is a god tier deck, tier 1, and then you would have other hands where you draw into nothing but your non-shield, and your opponent attacks you for 20, and you look at your hand, you have 3 cards with shield value, and then you just die. I think I found a good balance of early to mid game pieces that I feel make the deck, you know, I wouldn't say competitively but viable. I would definitely say it's a tier above some of the other decks I've been profiling on this channel, but still, you know, you do have to have a lot of knowledge about what the meta is looking like, and you do have to be a pretty good pilot. But that being said, let's go ahead and just get straight into deck profile. Alright, so starting where we always do, the ride line. Of course, playing a Stride deck set, you are locked into only one ride line. You do have to play all 4 Messiahs if you do choose to play any sort of Stride deck set. Of course, we do have our starter, Neon Messiah, basic D starter, but you do actually need to play it because when you do ride over with the Asleep Messiah, you do get the crest as well as draw a card. Then we have our Awakening Messiah. When you stride with a grade 4 Messiah, it gets called out and you soul charge 1, and then when it gets unlocked, you choose one of your units in the same column and give it 10k. In this specific build, we're not going to really be using that skill. This is just here to be a free card to call that we can lock with Messiah's Stride skill, which is that, let me see if I can get it to focus. There we go. When you stride, you choose one of your rear guards and lock it, as well as Counterblast 1. And you choose one of your vanguards, it gets 5k, and you lock one of your opponent's rear guards. Now, of course, because of the crest, do remember that during the end phase, all of your opponent's cards will unlock, and those units do get bound. So it is not like permanent lock, it is just removal. And then, of course, the other skill, which is the main reason this deck is pretty tanky, is whenever your card is unlocked, you can Soul Blast 1 in order to draw a card. So with this specific build of the deck, it is actually possible to draw 5 cards during the end phase, which is something that honestly, like most traditional Messiah lists aren't going to be doing. Typically they'll be doing like 3 during the end phase, but I built the deck in such a way where you can hyper accelerate your soul without playing any of the cards that I do not like. But enough teasing, let's go ahead and just continue the deck. Right, so starting off with some standard stuff, moving into the main deck, we do of course just have that is 3 copies of the Stride Fodder Dragon. Of course, this is when it's discarded from hand while riding to grade 3 or 4 stride, you do draw a card, and then it has another skill where when it's placed, if you're on grade 4, it gets plus 10k and you have a mandatory soul charge. So obviously the soul charge works really well with Messiah because, you know, you need soul in order to soul blast in order to draw cards. Of course, it does have another skill where it gets shield, but you're never going to be using that skill. Only playing 3 because, like I just said, this card does not get any shield, and one of my philosophies with building this deck was I want to minimize the amount of non-shield that I do have to play in the deck. Of course, that does mean we have to play a little bit lower quantities of Stride Fodder, which can sometimes make it a little bit difficult to stride since we are not Chronojet and we don't search out our grade 3 for free. But I think just like the benefit of having more shield in your deck kind of outweighs, you know, the inconsistency of seeing your grade 3s. But I think that this deck sees it decently enough. Of course, the other main Stride Fodder that we do want to be pitching is the Prelude of Genesis. Of course, this is an order card that you play with CB1. If you have the Alter Ego Messiah crest, you can choose a Messiah from drop zone, call it to rear, and then you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and lock it. So a little bit more extra removal there. But the other skill is also pretty important. When you discard this in order to stride, you choose either your Hearts or your Vanguard, and you reduce the next CB cost you pay by CB1. It doesn't really matter which one you use. That ideally you always want to be going into your turn with like 1 CB. This kind of ensures that you can do your whole plays without any CB. Obviously, if you have no face-up damage, you're probably going to want to use that on your heart to lock your back row rear guard, because you always have things like Sacrifice Messiah, who are going to be unlocking during the battle phase, allowing you to CB1 for your stride anyway. So it's also there because we're mostly just playing Messiahs as our only forms of lockers in this deck, and I did want to have some way to, you know, actually get them back, so that if I see them in the early game, they end up getting damage checked and I heal them out, they're not lost forever. So I think it's just pretty good. And then our last grade 3, not our last non-shield unfortunately, is going to be the Fire Regalius. Of course it is grade 3, so it does make for very good stride fodder, but of course the other effect is that you remove it in order to check top 5, call one thing. If you didn't call, draw a card. A lot of the other philosophy of this deck, since I am playing a lot fewer lockers in this deck, is I want to have as much consistency as possible. So things like Fire Regalius, where checking the top card of the deck for one of our key pieces, is very important to have for the deck. All right, moving on into the grade 2s. What would a Messiah deck be without Arrestor Messiah? Of course, I am playing it at 4 copies because I think just Arrestor Messiah is honestly just like the better of the two. I've seen a lot of Messiah deck lists where they're like 4 Lady Battler, 3 Arrestor. I don't really understand why that is. I mean, like, Arrestor is just objectively better than Lady Battler, right? Right? I mean, technically they're both 15k, but Arrestor is 15k by himself, whereas Lady Battler is, you know, just 10k, and she has to give 5k to something else. And on the note of Lady Battler, I've actually cut her from this deck. I noticed in every single build that I played with her, every time I would draw her, I'd instantly pitch her or call her to rush. And then every time I would go into my second stride, I would either not have enough CB or I would already have the pieces I need, so I'd never call her back. So she ended up just being like annoying. Like, she didn't do anything. Like, she was there as another locker, yeah, but I always found myself having enough like consistency to like see the Arrestor, to see the sacrifice, and she just was kind of taking up space and she didn't really do too much. So I did cut her from the deck. Definitely, if you're feeling a little nervous about not seeing your pieces, you could slide her back in the deck. I'll tell you a couple of things that maybe you could cut for her, but I think that since I've cut her, the deck has been feeling a hell of a lot better, which is why I think that that card is just kind of fake, in all honesty. But one card that we do have from, you know, the basic bitch lists is the 4 copies of Panspermia. Of course, this is our typical energy cycler. When you discard to ride or when you guard with it, EB1 or CB1, or EB3 or CB1, in order to just draw a card. I kept thinking about the fact that you can go second, discard a Panspermia, and draw 3 cards, and that option was just way too juicy for me to give up, so I had to slide him back into the deck. One thing you do need to note about this deck is that you do have a lot of energy blast usage that is a little bit higher than the average deck, so consider using CB on Panspermia sometimes. You have Sacrifice that's always there to kind of bail you out if you ever do use up all your counterblast, and especially in the early game, you don't really have any outlets to be using it, because we are not playing something like Valtrossa, which was good in the deck, but I think I wanted to take it in a different direction, because she does use CB in the early game, and usually that's not too big of an issue because you're taking a decent amount of damage in the early game and you want things to actually use that with. So the actual engine that I went with is, I did go back to set orders, but this time I am playing a different one. We do have the new set order Ice Fishing, which I thought was pretty solid for the deck. It reads very solid, but in practice, it just seemed a little bit too slow, which is why I added some cards that would make this card a little bit faster. But, you know, this is a skill. When it's in the order zone, EB2, rest it. Check the top 3 cards of your deck. Choose one card with equal to or less than your Vanguard, call it to rear guard, or if it's an order card, add it to your hand, and then if you added or call, this card goes into Soul. So obviously the Soul is very synergistic with what we're trying to do with Messiah, which is throw a bunch of cards in the Soul and then Soul Blast a ton during the end phase in order to draw a bunch of cards for our defense, so that we can live another turn. Obviously, this card is another reason why I feel comfortable just playing Arrestor as my only grade 2. It's this along with Fire Regalis lets you filter through the deck to see those Arrestors, whether you're culling them or like deck thinning to the point where you can draw into them at opportune times. So it's an overall solid card. This does eat away at your energy, and it makes things a little bit awkward, especially with Panspermia and another card that we're talking about. So you do need to think about your energy usage in this deck. It's a little bit more skill intensive than your average standard deck. So part of the reason I am saying that I'm leaning a little bit forward into the set order direction is because I know that a lot of Messiah lists will be playing this along with some other set order support, but I've decided to go a little bit further with that, and I'm actually playing one copy of Experiment Successful in this deck. This is a set 5 card. When it's put into the order zone, you draw a card, discard a card. It has this other effect, but this is the only research that we're playing, so that's the only one we're going to be using. So I just wanted to have another set order because we do have some set order synergy in this deck. And I wanted to make sure that it's a little bit more consistent. This is our last non-shield in the deck, so I feel like this is a comfortable amount of non-shield. I think it's around 10. But this card is pretty good. It combos with another card that we'll talk about a little bit later. But basically, it's just here to be the 5th set order. I didn't want to just be playing 4. I did toy around with, I think it's like the Howling Moonlight Soul Blast 1 draw card. But I didn't like that it was just using up a soul. I know in previous builds we played Habitable Zone and it was like taking out a loan on your soul, getting the draw now. But I just figured, you know, I need any set order and this one does the job pretty decently, I would say. I mean, the main reason that I did put it in is because it's one of the best. I needed a grade 2 set order that didn't have a cost. The Refractory Shock cost CB1, the Howling Moonlight cost Soul Blast 1. This one is free, so makes it pretty good. Of course, moving on into our grade 3s, we are playing 3 copies of Sacrifice Messiah. Now, I know historically I haven't really been very kind to Sacrifice. He is a GB1 at the end of the battle. He boosts. You can, if you have Vanguard of Messiah, you can lock him in order to give your Vanguard 5k. Then, if and only if you have 0 cards face up in your damage zone, you can countercharge 1. So I do not like the way that Sacrifice Messiah countercharges. It seems very clunky, and especially in a deck where Messiah, where you tend to get rushed pretty early in the early game, you might end up with 4 damage, and you definitely do not have enough ways to CB to the point where he'll actually become a countercharger there. But like I said, there are little situations when he does bail you out. The other good thing about him is he's a restanding booster effectively because he locks himself and then he gets unlocked. And then also just being another card that locks lets you reach those 5 draws during the end phase. But, you know, in this build specifically, he is very solid. So now the actual catalyst for this variant with the set orders is a card you probably might not have seen too much of. This is Schwarzer Eins. He's a grade 1, and then whenever your grade 2 or greater set order is put into the order zone, you slide him into the soul to draw a card. So you can probably already tell why this card is so solid in this deck. Basically, what I end up using this card for is early game aggro, because you can just afford to call this down, throw it behind any grade 1, you can throw it in front of a Sacrifice, and just start swinging at your opponent as early as turn 1, and then when you are ready to play your set order, you just slide him into soul, draw a card, free up that space. If you really want to, you can just like make a column of this guy plus Arrestor, swing with it, and then say you draw into the Sacrifice. You're like, okay, I want the Sacrifice behind Arrestor. Okay, let me play my set order. He'll go into the soul, and now I have the freed up slot for the Sacrifice. So basically, he can clear himself off the board to put your real attackers, which is one of the main issues I do have with the Messiah, and finding good cards to actually play in it, which of course is that your front row and your back row tend to be like already decided for you. It's always going to be Sacrifice and Arrestor, but of course, you know, he always does do in a pinch as just a grade 3 or a grade 3, grade 1 booster there, making those nice magic numbers of 23 on the first attack before you obviously unlock everything. Now, of course, if you do see him and then you use your Ice Fishing next, you can go ahead and play your Ice Fishing, slide him into soul, draw a card, and then you play the Ice Fishing. Assuming you hit off it, it also goes to soul. So that gives you 2 extra cards in addition to your ride line, meaning that assuming you're able to, you'll always lock the Waking, and assuming you have 2 more or 3 more unlockers, or lockers, I should say, you'll be able to draw those 5 cards because you'll have 5 soul. Theoretically, you can like, use 2 of them and then get 6 soul. And then if you manage to see 2 of these and 2 arresters, that's 6 cards during the end phase, which is kind of crazy. It also works very well with Experiment Successful, because the way it resolves is you put this into the order zone and then you have 2 effects to resolve. You choose which order you want to resolve them in. So obviously you would put Ainz into the soul and then you would resolve this. So it turns, this is a 2-card combo that basically says when you play this, draw 2, discard 1, which is pretty good. And then of course this just sits in the order zone and doesn't do anything. All right, so moving on to the grade 1s, I am going to be playing 4 copies of the Discard Cycler. Now, of course, when he is placed, if you are on the same grade or less as your opponent, he gets to energy charge on, which does actually work very nicely with the Ice Fishing. If you can manage to call 2 of these going second, that will give you the cost for a single Ice Fishing usage. But of course, the other skill, which is probably the one we use a bit more for, is the whenever a card is discarded, you EB3 and remove it from either rear or drop in order to add that card back to your hand. Now, this is probably where you want to think about using the most of your energy. Panspermia has the alternative counterblast cost, so you probably want to be using that, and so you can save the energy for this. And then, of course, your energy usage does get kind of wonky using 2 here and 3 here. You tend to have like 6 energy at any given time, so that puts you at 1, which can definitely put you in an awkward spot if you're trying to use like more than one of these per turn. Yeah, I definitely have not really figured out what ratio I want to have for these. I've been thinking about like 4 Ainz, 3 of these, just because like that energy usage does get kind of clunky at times. You could even technically cut these entirely if you wanted to add some more Lady Battlers, but I would definitely keep at least 3 Ainz in order to just like see them. And another card that's just more of a flex slot here is going to be, I'm going to be playing 1 copy of the Cat. Of course, this is almost always live as soon as after you stride. I just wanted to have more shield in the deck. Of course, when it's played on Guardian Circle, you put 2 cards that were in your ride deck back into the ride deck, which is going to be super easy since end phase, Soul Blast them out. Cost is already there. And then it becomes a 20k shield, or alternatively, if you do call it, you can add a set order back from your drop zone to your hand, which, as you've seen, you can totally do in this deck, because if you Soul Blast out, the Ice Fishing goes to drop, or if you say damage this and you heal it out, you can add it back. So definitely the fact that this is double usage, where normally in a Messiah deck it is not, definitely made me want to play it in this build. But of course, this is just a flex slot. You could always cut it. You could cut it for maybe the 4th Ainz, or if you want to, like I said, maybe you could even do the 4th Sacrifice, or you want to play the Lady Battler. But personally, I just like the extra shield value. All right, so moving on into our basic stuff. Of course, we are just playing the 4 PGs. I'm currently not playing Elementaria because in an earlier version of this build, I was playing some Blitz orders, the set order Blitz order, like the Pelican, the one. And I just didn't put it back in. But obviously, if you're going to play this deck, you can definitely afford to play Elementaria in this build specifically. Okay, so for the trigger lineup, this is actually a little bit reminiscent of yet another old build, playing 5 crits. Of course, we don't want to play Dekacop because he goes to Soul. And speaking of going to Soul, we're playing 4 of the Soul in front and 2 of the 20k front. I was thinking about probably putting this back to 7-4, but someone stole all of my Brontgate critical triggers, so I'm just going to be sticking with this ratio because, this is what I had before, and it works pretty well. I mean, you tend to have pretty big numbers and pressure, but I would probably play like 7 crits. Then, of course, 4 heals, same thing that always goes, and of course, your auto win button in the form of Elder Breath. Okay, and since this is a stride deck, I guess we do kind of have to go over the G-Zone. G-Zone is just 12 cards, all 12 cards that you can play. In this deck, you're pretty much only going into Amnesty, maybe Trans-Else once, but obviously you can't go into this because we're not playing MSI. If you wanted to play this, be able to go into this, you could cut one of the what's it called? The Stride Fodder for like a copy of Alter Ego, I guess. But personally, I wouldn't do that. Obviously, this is your main one. When it attacks CB1, choose any number of locked cards. Oh, you use CB1 and flip something. Choose any number of locked cards, unlock them, and then for each card you unlock, choose one of your cards. It gets plus 5k for each of those cards you unlocked. Obviously, this is what we're going to. We have Tranzels, who is also another bad card from set 6, along with Lady Battler, at least in my opinion. He is a GB3. When he attacks CB1, unlock all of your lock cards, choose up to the same number of your opponent's rear guards as face-up cards in your G-Zone, and lock them. And then for each Tranzels in your G-Zone, you choose one of your rear guards, and it gets 5k, which is honestly pretty bad. The only reason you'll really go into Tranzels on your second stride over Amnesty is if your opponent has like something really annoying on the board and you want to just get rid of it, or say they denied your stride skill, so you don't have a way to, you know, remove it. You would just go into Tranzels to lock like 2 or 3 things. It would be 2 things, right? Yeah, because if you're doing the second stride, you only have 2 face-up cards in your G-Zone. Probably only 1 Tranzels, so you would only get like an extra 5k, which is why this card is not very good. And then Exilix, we're probably not just going to go over. Honestly, you probably don't even need to play the Exilix because just because of the way this deck is built and how fast it goes through the deck, you really only have enough gas to go to 2 stride turns. By the time you get to your 3rd stride turn, you're pretty much just decking out, and then you probably don't ever have any time to go into the 4th. So either they're dead by that time or you are. Alright, that's going to do it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.